Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Tricked Before. This time, Sarek, need I say more? Well, we're going to talk about it for about an hour after that, but in this intro, I need not say more. But I will say it, you know I'm going to say it, I say it all the time, patreon.com/IBD. Go there, support the show, support the network, support what we're doing. We got a long way to go, guys, but it doesn't take much to keep us afloat and to keep getting that bonus content. Lots of great stuff, not just on It's All Been Tricked Before, the IBD Radio Hour stuff, all kinds of cool stuff, behind the scenes, secret stuff, bloopers. They're funny without context. So patreon.com/IB. Go there, support us, and support us here. Now enjoy this episode with the unforgettable Sarek on It's All Been Tricked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Tricked Before. Your regular hosts are here.
This is Steven.
And Keith. Sorry, I got distracted.
Jimmy-Jerome, what distracted you, Keith?
A message from Marianne. It's
okay. I thought it was Ben. You had Ben Dyson.
Oh,
getting ahead of us. Getting ahead of ourselves already.
We're here to talk Sarek. First impressions.
You know what? I had all these quibbles. I wrote a ton of notes. This might be the most notes I've ever written, or at least in a while. And I was like, I felt like a lot of them were quibbles, but then in the end, I felt pretty satisfied. So, and I love Mark Lenard. I love Sarek. So. Yeah, overall, I think it was a good episode. I don't know that I loved it, but there's a lot to talk about here.
That's a good and bad sign, I think. Maybe I agree. I'm not sure here. It's just there is something, something rubbed me the wrong way about it, and I can get into the details. Mm-hmm. I feel kind of like one of those internet trolls or a hipster or something complaining about some of the stuff. It's not even like, oh, they didn't get these details here. It's just something. It was like a little. All right, we'll get to that, but I mean, overall, it was an interesting episode.
I guess I'm going to be the outlier here. I really, really liked it. I thought it started a little slow, but by midway through, I was into it, and by the time Sarek really took center stage, I was 100% in, absolutely loving Mark Lenard's performance, and sold.
Well, let me backtrack and say that, I mean, his performance was great. I mean, Mark Lenard was great in it. There's no question of that. And I thought, the performances of everyone really were pretty good.
So this story came about. I want to give a little bit of backstory here. When Denise Crosby was talking about wanting to come back onto the show, and they began writing a script that involved both Mark Lenard and Sarek and Tasha Yar. And the original idea for yesterday's Enterprise was a team of Vulcan scientists led by Sarek, which he was never a scientist, but they accidentally travel to the past using the Guardian of Forever and kill Sarek, the founder of modern Vulcan logic. When they return to the present, they find Vulcans are allied with the Romulans and at war with the Federation, and that's where things start to get yesterday's Enterprise-y. But Michael Piller, who was one of the exec producers at that point, wasn't really happy with the script and wanted it centered to be on the Next Gen cast, not this team of Vulcans. So he dropped Sarek and Guardian of Forever from the story, whereas a couple of the writers, Mark Cushman and Jake Jacobs, decided to do this original Sarek story instead.
I think that was the right call.
Yeah,
I do too.
Sounds almost like a movie. There's so much going on there.
I do too. I mean, yeah, that would need to be, I think, 2 parts or a film. I think you're right.
Well, I mean, you said it right there about him not supposing to be a scientist. If he's like a diplomat or something, then that seems a little forced.
Yeah, so I think that story could have worked without him, but even without him, and it's just a team of Vulcan scientists, I feel like that would have been relatively convoluted and a lot. And I get why they want to keep it focused on the lead characters. Although you could argue that the Barclay episode shortly thereafter wasn't all that focused on the lead characters.
I think it was, well, right. That's
maybe a little more than this would have been, but yeah. So we'll start at the beginning of the episode. We're hearing that Sarek's coming, and he beams on board. And of course, it's Mark Lenard, who we all adore and love. And he seems relatively the same Sarek, but also like quiet and reserved and a little bit off. And we got that whole weird warning from his aides that like, hey, he's going to be real sick, leave him alone. And he shows up and he's like, he's not real sick. He's just Sarek. I don't know. What was your first impression, especially Steven, when Sarek just beams on board?
Yeah, I thought his aides, the exposition was especially suspicious. But something's going to happen when he's coming. But I I thought they were, and I will say I do like the switch or not the switch. For me, it was kind of a switch over from what these, and the episode throughout it up until that point kind of alluded like, oh, these guys are kind of shady. What are they up to, kind of a thing. And then it turns out they're actually trying to do a good thing, even though they're struggling with it. And especially, I was especially thrown off when the one guy was like, that it would be impossible for them to attend that concert. And I'm like, wait a minute. There are always alternatives. Come on, Sarek.
There are always possibilities.
Right. Yes, and I also got thrown early on for some reason. I don't know how my ears did this, but they're not the best. But I thought they said his wife's name was Patty, which I thought would have been great. That should be my alternate episode, but I have a different one for that. So yeah, Perrin was cool. And then I think we've talked about this in the past. Clearly, Sarek has a type, and it's Earth women.
That was my first note.
I have that same type.
Literally,
so
Sarek has a type.
Well, Earth girls are easy, as we know. Oh, sorry. No, Perrin, played by Joanna Miles, who's best known for Judge Dredd, the 1973 The Glass Menagerie, and this role. She'll do a second episode, so this isn't her only appearance, but still. Yeah, I liked her. I felt like she was very similar to Amanda, and I guess that's a fine line to walk because fans probably want to see Amanda, but from a logical standpoint, Amanda's definitely dead by now. I mean, McCoy was super old, and she was older than McCoy.
Yeah. So
all right.
So, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
Sarek's 202 in this episode.
Because that makes total sense. Because I was like, what? Wasn't Jane Wyatt available? But that makes a lot more sense.
No, they just decided she was too old. Or not Jane Wyatt was too old. The character of Amanda would have been too old.
I had a note about him being 202, and obviously, Amanda would be dead, even with humans living longer. I guess to a Vulcan, 200 is like whatever 70 to current Earth people.
I'd say like 80, but yeah, you're right. In the sense of live like to 300 or anything, but
because if you're 180, you're probably not going to get Bendai. But if you're over 200, you will. Well, I guess this is actually unique to Sarek because my thought was it's kind of the Superman syndrome where everyone that's around him will die. Everyone that's human, and it just made me think of Spock. Everyone around him, Kirk, and everyone else, regardless of the adventures they go on and that kind of stuff, just from even from an old age perspective, he's going to watch all his friends die.
Except for Scotty.
Except for Scotty.
Well, it's not clear in the canon if Scotty outlives Spock or not, but they will both still be alive and relatively healthy when we see them in the show.
Yeah. So I guess, initially I thought of it as for Sarek, but then eventually I thought of it more for Spock because Spock obviously has these friendships. He's half human. I wonder if his half human part would make him live not quite as long.
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, we know we've seen Spock's death. I assume you've seen Spock's death, like the real death, the one after Athacon when they bring him back. So we know when he dies, and it's not of natural causes.
Right.
Also, his human half makes him half as prosperous.
Oh, Perrin mentions Sarek's first wife, Amanda, but we know he had Sybok with a Vulcan high priestess. So were they not wives? Were they not married? Was Sybok a love child?
Yeah, the whole family tree with Sarek, I don't have down at this point.
Well, so as far as I understand it, he had, I thought it was a marriage, but I guess it was an affair with a Vulcan priestess, birthed Sybok, who for some reason I was thinking was half Romulan, but he's not. He's fully Vulcan. Then he married Amanda and had Spock. When Spock was young, he adopted Michael Burnham, a human, who is never mentioned. But then she ends up being classified, her status, and so they're not allowed to talk about her before the original series starts. But that's not his biological child. And then I guess when Amanda dies, he moves on and marries Perrin, who presumably they don't have any kids. I don't think it's ever mentioned that they had kids. Because when they mention, the Picard mentions he met Sarek at Sarek's son's wedding and had been tongue-tied by the encounter. It's a nice little thing to imagine of a young Picard like being really tongue-tied around Sarek, which I get. Like, I would be too. Sarek's awesome.
Well,
Legend by that point.
The conversation they were having in the hallway. That's what kind of started me off. And I want to preface this by saying that a lot of sci-fi properties do this sort of thing. The general kind of flavor of the genre is to do the name dropping thing and these pop-up cameos and little references and superhero stuff too. They do that sort of thing all the time. And I will say that I'm certainly guilty of geeking out over that sort of thing sometimes. And every now and then it just kind of hits me and I go, okay, come on. No, in this case, it was a little bit of both. It was sort of like, I liked the idea of what they were doing, but at the same time, it felt a little, well, all right. How realistic do you think it is that every one of the major characters we saw in original series would be famous to that extent, or be that kind of figure of like, oh my God, the famous Sarek?
So I will say, while the Enterprise itself had a legendary crew and their senior staff were pretty famous, Sarek, I think, was way more famous than them because he was this legendary ambassador across all these worlds that had quite a reputation. When we first met him, he was just like a low-level ambassador, but everything they built up with him after indicated he was a galactically famous, very successful diplomat.
They called him the greatest man of his time.
And I totally buy that.
I was trying to think, is there a diplomat that we could think of that is the man of our time?
I mean, Condoleezza Rice, obviously. No, I'm kidding.
Sure. Well, yeah, and I guess for us, it would be a president or it wouldn't necessarily be an ambassador. But
no, our Secretary of States, we'd be talking about like John Kerry or Hillary Clinton. But how long those people will be remembered as Secretary of State after they're gone, I don't know.
Right.
Will we be talking about Kissinger? He wasn't really...
I think we talk about him in derogatory terms. At least I do.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of somebody that wasn't a president. Princeton known for international.
I'll quote from Annie Hall. Oh yeah, Princeton makes mistakes. Kissinger taught there. So, so here's my question, and I know my answer, but not just. And this is just based on bias and not knowing all the other Sarek stuff in the future. But is Spock not greater?
No, I would say no. I would say no at this point. So the Spock storyline that's coming up is probably the most important part of his career. I would argue more important than his service on the Enterprise. And what we're going to see of him in the next gen extends through what happened to him at the beginning of Star Trek 2009 and all of that. His work to reunify the Vulcans and Romulans is his central plot when we see him from here on out. And that's a pretty big thing to achieve. I will spoil something from Discovery Season 3 in that eventually, after his death, they do reunify. And while he was long dead before it happened, they gave him a lot of the credit for laying the groundwork. So he's remembered hundreds of years later for that.
My point about the fame and so forth, it seems like sometimes the writers will slip in things like that as a vehicle to communicate as a fan would. For Picard and Riker to be our eyes and ears or our hands to say, oh my God, Sarek's here, and they kind of glide by his son's wedding, which that's fun too. Oh,
one more thing before we leave Sarek being the greatest man of his time. Tell you what, he's not number one dad. He's not number one dad. I'll tell you that.
Well, he never was.
No, and you went through his whole family history. Is any of that logical?
No, but we know Vulcans have emotions. They just repress them.
Right.
And he at some point says marrying Amanda was a logical choice. I don't know how you justify that, but okay.
Yeah, that the Vulcan logic thing always comes back, and it's almost like the DC Bizarro stuff. However, different writers just decide to do that sort of thing. It seems like a nightmare to keep up as far as internal consistency and what they can and can't do, or what they would be motivated to do or demonstrate at any given time.
So the way I understand the Vulcans, and I will say a lot of this is formed by Star Trek Enterprise's attitude towards the Vulcans, is they like to talk a big game that they're all ruled by logic and everything, but they're just as ruled by emotion. And when you look at them through that lens, that it's just a facade they're putting up that they don't always live up to. In fact, I'd argue most of the time they don't live up to it.
Yeah, I
think it makes sense to me as a species.
Yeah.
And I like that complexity, that they're really not pure in their logic. that's just something they aspire to.
That does tie into what they demonstrate later as well. Just the way that when that what was the condition called? Bendai?
Benghazi.
They called it Bendai, and then somebody else called it Bandy. Like a sentence later.
Well, Shatner doesn't know how to pronounce. No, I'm kidding.
Who is Bendai? First of all, because I saw it as Ben Ben Die Dye. They named it after an Earth person. Is the way I saw it. He must have been a real a-hole.
But it was spoken of, and they mentioned that how much of a dishonor that would be for a Vulcan to have, or how embarrassing, or how something like that, mess with their self-image.
Yeah, the one thing that didn't totally light up for me was they said nobody living now has had this. It's a super rare, and I'm like, just like nobody had their Katra put back. Like their family is legendary. But I would say that, again, I'm going to point this to when Vulcans do have it, they hide it and keep it under wraps, and it's probably more common than they let on. That's what I'm going to guess.
Well, the way they referred to it, I thought it was clearly an allusion to what we would call Alzheimer's.
Alzheimer's, dementia. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So back to the wedding comment here. Per Roddenberry himself, they did intend that line to mean Spock's wedding. They never established in canon that he has another son. At the last minute, the writers and producers decided to leave it vague just in case they wanted to backtrack and not make it Spock. According to Roddenberry, that line was always intended to be Spock. And in the novels, which are not canon for the show, we see that wedding in a novel called Vulcan's Heart, and it's mentioned in other novels that it is the wedding between Spock and Sarek, Captain Sarek now, who is still a captain of a starship. And even after Spock goes and does his thing that we're going to see coming up in season 5, I believe, Sarek and him are still married. They're just not living together. They're both pursuing their careers.
Is that Kirstie Alley?
Marriage. Yes.
Okay.
Well, and I guess /
Robin Curtis.
Right. I guess then, my whole him being sad because he loses all his Earth friends. At least he married Sarek. So
at least he married Sarek. Yeah. I like the idea of them ending up together because they shared something special, and I could see them. She understands a part of him. As much as I love Kim Cattrall in Star Trek VI, I was sad that wasn't Sarek's character. Although I'm glad with Kim Cattrall's character's ending that wasn't Sarek's ending. But clearly they intended Sarek to be like a main character in the films and going forward. And if Kirstie Alley had stayed, I think they would have. I mean, we've debated that before. We won't get into that too deep.
Kirstie Alley's on the new Sex and the City and Kim Cattrall's role, they're not going to call her Samantha either. So,
oh my God, that would be hilarious. Except Kirstie Alley is a human piece of garbage.
So there's no way she's going to be on that. So
right. Whoa. Well,
did something happen recently, or?
Oh yeah,
she's a total trumper.
Yeah.
So
at least maybe we can convince Jimmy to like Robin Curtis more. Finally,
yeah, it does. And I looked up Robin Curtis the other night because I was like, I would really appreciate if the new Star Trek shows one of them we saw Sarek again, or even give her a spinoff. But Robin Curtis has retired from acting in like 1999 and is a real estate broker.
Huh.
So either you have to lure her back, which after 20 years, I'm not sure how good she'd be. Like some of these actors that didn't work for 20 years and then showed up in reboots aren't great. Or just cast a third actress to play the role, which I'd be fine with. Yeah. So they beam aboard and they tell Picard that he can't do a state dinner or Mozart or anything. And it's like,
it's impossible.
Couldn't you warn him before he planned all that stuff? Why did you have to wait till you got there?
This is information I could have used yesterday.
Right? You'd think it was real weird. It didn't make sense from a story perspective how they had Sarek beam in sideways with his hood up just so he could turn and reveal.
Yeah.
That was clearly for TV and not logic.
When his staff showed up first to do that, that felt like a purposeful tease. People are like, wait, is that Sarek? What's going on there? To kind of, it's like, oh, we got you. And then when he showed up with the, to do the pivot, it's just, this is kind of adding to my thing about them, some milking it almost to the point of being self-defeating when they're kind of prodding it. Hey, look at this. Look how cool this is.
I was thinking it was Journey to Babel that he did the same turn, but it was Balance of Terror where Mark Lenard does that same turn and they're like, oh my God, he looks just like Spock.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
When he used the phrase, she who is my wife, as a by way of introduction. I'm pretty sure
that's how he described Amanda too, though, in Journey to Babel, isn't it?
Huh.
Oh, you might be right. Maybe that's a Vulcan thing.
I felt it was very designed to be a very similar scene.
I'll jump ahead to this. Later, he says she can be logical sometimes. And it was very, I was like, what is this? What is this? The Lockhorns? Is this some kind of Andy Cap bit? What is this?
She can be logical when she tries. I think it's something like that.
Yeah, something like that. I'm like, wait, what? What kind of Punch and Judy thing is going on here? What is this? I'm running out of old obscure references, but what kind of? Oh, that's my wife, I tell you.
That's a the fairer sex or something.
It's really but Vulcans, as we've been discussing, Vulcans aren't much different from us.
From that scene, we get to see the slime pit in the conference room, which is 150 degrees Celsius, which I looked up is 302 degrees Fahrenheit. And I get that maybe that particular slime doesn't bubble until you're higher than 302 degrees, but Wes and Geordi and them were so casual around that pit where if they just reached in, they would scald themselves badly. I feel like they should have been more careful and maybe some steam coming up or something.
A watch pot of a watch thing of slime does not.
I liked how colorful it was. I liked the rainbow look.
I thought it was cool too. Geordi and Wesley talk. Wesley has a date. How old is Wesley at this point?
Like 18.
Okay.
17, 18.
Should Geordi be having a conversation with Wesley about how attractive his date is?
I think that's okay because it's a younger crewman and Geordi is a younger officer. He's a pretty young senior officer. But to me, that whole conversation...
And I'm not one who should be judging, but...
Well, I assumed this officer's a little older than Wesley, a little younger than Geordi, so there was a good mix.
She is an official ensign.
I mean, if she's an ensign, she's definitely older than Wesley, probably by at least 4 years. So he's going for the older women. But, 18-year-old, 22-year-old, that's not much of a difference. It may be in maturity, but not in age.
Yeah.
But what I took from that conversation was, man, Geordi's jealous of Wesley's confidence. Yeah. Like when he's like, oh, I can't believe you asked her out. To me, I'm thinking, because I never would.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair way to look at it, especially when we get to the later argument, which I'm jumping way too far ahead to get to. But I appreciate that there was some serialization in some of the things that were revealed there as well. So,
we'll drop in the Leah Brahms reference in their fight.
Yeah, I didn't realize anybody knew.
I didn't realize Wesley knew.
That too.
But I guess that it's a small ship. Gossip circles anywhere.
It goes back
they're
to
fighting about women. I'm going to go ahead and cover my note on that too. It's just so pathetic because I feel like of the entire crew, they may be the two worst men with women in the ship. So it's. I mean, I'm a nerd, so I don't want to be derogatory towards nerds, but it was a total nerd fight of which one's the nerdiest nerd.
Yeah. First of all caps action. That's the word that Geordi used to describe
somebody to get tossed in the slime pit and get scalded.
Well, no, I mean, Geordi used the term action for Wes not getting enough action.
Oh, yeah.
Which I was
90s slang still in use in the 24th century.
And I was mind blown that Wesley went there with the holodeck. He actually, that whole thing with, at least I can get women outside of that. So,
I thought that whole sequence up until Riker came in, and even for a couple of seconds after that, was a dream sequence because the music was very over the top from the get-go. Which kind of made me think, all right. I mean, even before they were even fighting, I'm like, okay, what are you tipping me off to here? But I thought it was hilarious.
I mean, we should have had. That's going to be my alternate episode. I wanted to see this in the original series, and that kind of fighting, and Riley gets beat up by Sulu or something.
So we might as well go there while we're here. My alternate episode is as we go through the episode. We get that barroom brawl or whatever, and I have notes on that too. But we get into all that. That everyone's getting angry because of the Ben died thing. My alternate episode is everyone gets angry, but it's at Wesley. So the whole ship is just getting in his face.
Oh, poor Wesley.
Well, he's not taking it. He's giving it right back. But
I mean, how great would it have been if we just saw a random shirtless Sulu swashbuckling down the corridor with no comment on it? Just like George Takei. Was that Sulu or was it just some old Asian crewman?
Well, and that's exactly where it went right away. It was like, we already did the Naked Now. What is going on here?
I think this is a superior episode to the Naked Now. Just saying. Naked Time, I don't know. That's debatable. But the Naked Now, I think this is superior.
Well, it wasn't played for comedy in the same way.
True.
Steve was saying that scene was funny, which it was, but it also made me uncomfortable in a way that I couldn't quite. It just I felt bad for both of them in that moment. I wanted some resolution, like for them to go, "Oh God, I'm sorry," or something. Like
I remember the episode. Well, I don't think I've seen this episode, but I know the story and I knew what was going on enough to I figured it. Like I knew what was happening, so I never had those bad feelings.
I think if it hadn't been for the music, I might have been more like you, Keith, where I was like, "Oh man, this is terrible," but I was just like, "This is entertaining and hilarious." Also, I still thought it was a dream. So.
Yeah. But I mean, it's not that there wasn't going to be an explanation eventually. It's just that there didn't seem to be that sense of resolution between them where they go, "Oh man, what was I doing? I'm sorry," something to kind of diffuse that.
Hey,
what I wrote from that first scene in the slime pit though was Sarek is grumpy.
Yeah, so I wrote that every time he comes to Enterprise, he ends up in sickbay, and he's illogical, and he's angry every time. Every time.
Huh.
Who wants to say? I don't want him on my ship. I don't care. I don't care what ship. I don't care if I'm running the Cerritus. I don't want him on my ship. He's not my man of time, all time, or his time, or whatever.
That's similar to the thing that I noted about that. That's where
Tag loop of Deneb 5 is my guy. Sorry.
I didn't know what was going on per se. I mean, I'm pretty sure I must have seen this episode, but like many of the others, I'd forgotten. So that for me was my first hint at what was something happened. You know, the whole, maybe there's a turn coming. Maybe we're thinking that they're up to something shady, as Stephen was saying at the beginning, but perhaps they're actually protecting the crew from him for some reason. Like first I thought it was just because he was like maybe like a little dementia, he's being a diva, that kind of thing. It was like, oh God, we don't want to irritate them, but
or an evil changeling.
Keith, I think I figured out the resolution you could have had for the Geordi Wesley. Wesley could have been like, "I'm sorry I make fun of your fake holodeck girlfriend," and Geordi would be like, "I'm sorry I make fun of your slutty ensign you're going out with."
Oh my God.
So then they could have hugged it out.
Oh, how sweet. That's better than Wesley's first girlfriend who served on the USS Canada. I think her name was Alberta. Never mind. The next scene after that was Perrin explaining Vulcan logic and their non-emotional state to Picard, which to me was my least favorite scene in the entire episode and felt completely for the television audience, and it made absolutely no sense Picard wouldn't already know that about Vulcan, or that Perrin would think he wouldn't know that about Vulcan. It was purely like, you people who are tuning in now that have never watched original Trek and don't know what Vulcans are, this is what they are.
A similar thing happens later when Sarek explains what a mind meld is. It's like, oh, we're aware, but yeah. My thoughts to your thoughts, my mind to your mind. We know, but obviously we know, but not everyone knows.
The Mozart concert was fun, and I noticed Crusher sure saved Picard a seat, but then he played it all cool, where he just like acknowledged her and then turned around and started talking to Riker. I'm like, oh yeah, no, they're totally bagging.
I thought that scene was really good. It might have been my favorite part of the episode, oddly enough. I just thought, at first I thought, oh, this would be kind of cheesy, but it's like, and they kept playing the music, and I'm like, wow, this is an extended bit of music here. But then
this is the director's cut.
Yeah, right. But I love the way it played over just the reactions from people. There wasn't any actual noise.
I mean, if they cut a little bit of that music, we could have had resolution between Wesley and Geordi. But.
Yeah. Maybe Tasha Yar could have showed up too or something. And
that scene was probably an homage to something, but I don't know what. But.
I mean, I wasn't thrilled with Data letting Perrin pick his person that he's going to copycat. I felt like he should have done what he does, which is like merge different styles. But yeah,
I like the idea of what they were going for. They were kind of showing off both characters in the sense of what Data can do, and then also Perrin having the knowledge to have a preference.
Her having the knowledge was fine. It just felt like, okay, this is our automaton that can just pull up this from his memory banks. You're not showing Data as a person.
True. My favorite part about that scene, of course, was the point of the scene. Threw me off a little bit, but I just loved the way that
the actor is Rocco Sisto. The character is Sakoff. Sakoff? I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but Sakoff. That actor's best known for Donnie Brasco, After Hours, Far and Away, Frequency. He's got 60 credits. He played small roles in those things. He wasn't like one of the leads or anything.
I think it was like Sagoff or something like that, or
Sagoff is that's
something like
you're
that.
Probably right.
But anyway, just that camera look, them shifting down the aisle so that the tear comes down. He's just like,
and Riker noticing and Troy noticing and all of it.
But I had it. It looked like he just the way he was watching him so intently, like oh God, I'm gonna have to shoot him, aren't I? It's like, oh God, that kind of and
it made it feel like again like that to me in the episode, like, oh, these guys are up to no good over there. And then I loved that the turn, the reveal that no, they're looking out for him, kind of. Or they are.
The cop was looking out for him a heck of a lot better, I feel, than Mendrosen, played by William Dennis, who's best known for this after Things to Do in Denver. He's also in the Golden Girls, like one episode. He doesn't have very many credits, but he's got 10 acting credits. Yeah, he seemed more worried about his career than Sarek.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the Vulcan Sakoth seemed to actually be more concerned about Sarek.
Excuse me. I think they did both pronunciations through that episode as well.
Huh.
The human staffer, very, very much like a
staff.
Or a human representative today in politics. As far as it's almost like they're a team together. The human and the Vulcan. So he's the one who has to do all the lying and so forth. He has to do all the smoothing and the kind of, he's there to do the people work, although the Vulcan is there to lend more credibility to what is happening.
I guess it would only be logical to travel with somebody that's illogical and can navigate that better.
Yep.
From there, we go to O'Brien's fight, which, yay, O'Brien. I like this to see him.
That was a good use.
Yeah, I thought that was just a classic barroom brawl, which was great. What I also loved was there were women.
Oh, squaring up.
Fist fighting. But why was Geordi not fist fighting with everybody else?
Right. That's what I didn't understand.
Like, if you're affected once, you're immune? I don't think so.
Yeah, I feel like if Wesley had walked in there, he'd have popped him one.
I feel like that scene was really missing Guinan. I wanted her to... I mean, she definitely wouldn't have been affected. And I don't think she'd be throwing punches, but I would have liked to have seen her deal with it.
The one other thing that was in there that was a classic was broken glass, because it was a TNG episode. There was a glass table. There's a barroom brawl. It's Chekhov's glass table. It's going to get broken.
So a couple of things there. I feel like if I tried hard enough, I could come up with an explanation for how it was working. But it's a good point that it should be clearer than that as far as why wasn't Geordi affected in that moment.
Yeah. Because every single other person in the bar was. I guess, and I accidentally skipped over a note that slightly before that, we had Crusher chewing out Wesley and slapped him for the first time in her life, apparently. She said she's never hit him before. But Wesley wasn't affected then. So I guess because Geordi and Wesley were affected earlier, they weren't affected now. But that doesn't really make sense for the way they said this thing worked.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So the other thing, the great comedy thing about that, the way they had that scene set up is just so you can have that scene break with Riker and Worf walking toward the 10 forward. Oh, I haven't noticed anything. I see your point.
And we just had a 10 forward bar fight in the Barclay episode, so it seemed too soon to do it again. Yeah.
Was it a real bar fight?
No, it was
right.
Yeah. Holodeck.
It was just that opening thing. Yeah.
This is where the episode was just okay for me. I hadn't taken that turn yet where I was really, really into it, but I did think it was odd that Troy could not sense each burst as it occurred and lock down a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she had her theories and her and Crusher did figure it out, which I appreciated because they're two smart, capable doctors in the medical field. Or I don't think Troy's a doctor, but you know what I mean. But I feel like her sitting behind him and everything.
Jimmy doesn't respect psychiatry. He thinks it's junk science.
No, I think if she was a doctor, they would have called her Dr. Troy at some point in 7 seasons.
Riker calls her Dr. Troy quite often.
Psychiatrists aren't medical doctors, so it doesn't count. You don't want to put that extra doctor in front of a. Anyway, that's a nice topical thing that happened recently, wasn't it?
If she had a doctorate, I would call her doctor. Anyway,
like Dr. J.
Anyway, no, I didn't buy it because she can sense people's emotions. Certain people, I pick them out. So how could she not have pinpointed it right there at the concert?
So, so while we're on people empaths, this brings up 2 notes I have. One is Data tells Sakoff all about that. Well, she's really she's only half Betazoid, blah, 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 blah. I was like, is Data an overshare? It's just, He's like the Enterprise just being like, hey, anybody who's on board, you can have access to all our files. He's just like, oh yeah, blah, 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 blah. And da, 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 da. Oh, and let me tell you something else. That guy, he's got an IBS. Like nobody, you don't have to tell everybody everything, Data. The other thing is, so is Bendai like a ship meld? Is that what's going on? Like, wasn't he more or less melding with a bunch of people on the ship?
What?
Apparently.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Bendai. So it's like, he's trying to hold it in, but it's getting out. It's like, I know he's the greatest man of his time, but that goes well beyond Alzheimer's, obviously. Although I guess Alzheimer's does affect the people around them very much. But
that's what they're doing.
Maybe that is, but the only emotion was anger that was coming out, right?
Yeah, that's what seemed to be coming out. But that's one of the stronger emotions, and certainly one he'd been trying to tamp down.
Along those lines, I mean, from what Jimmy was saying too, this of course is like a slapdash kind of Band-Aid explanation. I could almost buy that what she was sensing was Sarek's emotions spilling out in bursts, and so when they were manifesting in other people, it wasn't like she was picking them from the people. It was sort of like an overlay instead. But yes, it's a stretch.
Yeah, I think she should have been able to pinpoint a little sooner. Suckoth controlling Sarek's emotional state remotely. I know we saw Spock like mind control somebody through a rock door in the original series episode.
Right.
God.
Have we not seen Vulcans do that kind of thing again until now?
That's exactly what I thought of, because I was like, well, how could you do the ship? I'm like, well, Spock was able to do that thing, and maybe you could talk me into it. If like every
Spock
time
was only a half Vulcan, so
we're right. Well, that's true too. But maybe every time people got in a fight, like Sarek was walking by, or he was in the next room.
I don't know about that.
Most time he was meditating.
I guess I just took for granted that Sarek was super powerful and could project. It was Suckoth that I was more focused in on of making the Spock parallel.
All right, see, that didn't bother me as much because I guess I just assumed that they had a student-teacher relationship and they probably would have bonded at some point or another. Maybe there's some residual kind of link, something like that. You can kind of...
Vulcans don't just go around and mind meld with everybody they hang out with.
Well, they seem to be pretty close, though.
Yeah. It sounds like they can't control it if you have Bendai. Speaking of Bendai, they say they can't cure it, but isn't there something to keep the symptoms? I would think maybe they developed something to keep the symptoms.
If they admitted it.
And maybe, again, this is that Alzheimer's parallel where in 91 or whenever, 90, when this came out, we really didn't have anything for Alzheimer's. I felt like the Alzheimer's diagnosis was new, and now we call ultimate Alzheimer's, which is a misnomer too. But maybe that was kind of part of that parallel too. I mean, now we have Aricept, and there are different things. There are all kinds of things that can make people's memories better, even if it makes them kind of a zombie and that kind of thing. There should be something, and maybe there is something that will keep the symptoms down. But Sarek's so proud; he's like, I'm not even going to take that. I don't need that, because he was in denial. He was denying that he even had it. He was in the first D of Dabda. So.
Well, I think because Suckoth protected him and was helping him control, I think that's why he didn't know he had it. He was in such a bubble being controlled by Mendrosin and Suckoth, and Perrin was in on it too.
Yep.
And I think, he just hadn't been confronted with it yet. I don't think it was him being in denial as much as it was him being ignorant of it.
Because my next note was about Data's question that implied that Sarek was in denial. When he was talking to Picard, and I really liked that discussion. It touched on the idea of Vulcans also being affected by emotions more than they would let on. Data was essentially asking the question, wait, if Sarek's a logical Vulcan, why wouldn't he notice these symptoms and then seek to do something about it or isolate himself, or any number of other things instead of just not doing anything about it? And just I like the way the discussion went from there, even though there wasn't like a definitive resolution necessarily, but
Yeah, I mean, my next note was just Mendrosin's keeping him in a bubble because Mendrosin's is a jerk.
Yeah, so. And I took a class recently, or CLE or whatever, that kind of addressed competency and this kind of issue with older folks. And one of the things they talked about was sometimes what'll happen is the person will think they're actually doing pretty good. But that's because they do have a network around them that is trying to help, but and they are helping, but are they
enabling? They're
enabling, yeah. And is it keeping them from being properly diagnosed and understanding just where they are? And I guess in an ideal situation, you could go on doing that forever, and it's fine. But there are other situations where, but if it's like, oh yeah, we have a giant house and she lives in a wing and we can take care of her and she's always here, we're around. But if it's like, oh, my mom lives in another town and that's a different category altogether. So yeah, from that perspective, I really like that analogizing it to dementia or Alzheimer's. I think it's interesting.
It was this point in the episode where Sarek really becomes front and center, and that's where I really got into this episode. I mean, he's still great. I wrote Sarek still great because of the way he handled the situation once it was presented to him, once he was convinced, and just also being open to hear Picard. Immediately, even though he didn't believe Picard at first. He said, oh, Picard's got something to say. I'm sending my staff away. I'm going to listen. I'm going to talk. I'm going to debate. I just was impressed with how he handled it. And also Lenard's performance was absolutely phenomenal, in my opinion.
Well, we saw the denial in place when he actually had to work through it with Picard and having that argument. He was fully shouting and still not acknowledging that something was wrong. But before that, Sarek gave his word that he was in perfect health. Like, come on, I'm fine. I give you my word. I promise I'm fine.
Well, I think that's the bargaining. That's the B. He's at the B there. There's denial. There was anger, clearly, because it was all over the Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
There was bargaining. I don't know if we had depression, but we definitely had acceptance.
Well, he did cry.
Dabba. Okay, maybe. All right, Dabba. We're there. We got there.
Recently, I had a doctor's appointment. I'm not going to bore the audience with all of that. However, all right, so you
got to be a super Patreon if you want all those details.
Yeah. First, it was last week. I went there. Something was wrong with the scheduling. They didn't tell me that I had to be more recently COVID tested, and they were like kind of freaked out about it. And I understood immediately. I mean, and they were telling me, I could tell that they were also a little concerned that I was going to be upset that I was going to have to just come back again this week after I got a more recent test, because I'd been tested like a couple months ago. And I understand that a lot of other people in that situation might have reacted. What? Come on. I feel fine. You can't do this to me. I drove here, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we've seen that happen over and over again recently. I feel like the point is my point being that, yes, the tendency for people to give you that kind of, come on, I'm a good person. You can trust me. I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
So the scene where Sarek's going to do the mind meld and he's facing the camera and he's talking about the mind meld, and then he steps aside and we see Picard. And my only thought was, are we supposed to be surprised it's Picard? Did we not? I thought it was pretty obvious it was going to be Picard. So why have the reveal that, oh, he's the one I'm mind melding with?
The only option was the two of them had to mind meld. Was that the only possible solution?
Somebody had to mind meld they were taking the emotions that were siphoning off the emotions into somebody else and taking their steadiness from them, their control. And Picard would have been somebody that had more control than most and could handle it better than most. You could argue there were other on the crew that were capable, and I think that's correct. But I think Picard was a logical choice if somebody was going to do this, if it worked the way it was depicted to work.
Do you guys think the Ligarians would have been like, oh, hey, man, Sarek is... He's in bad shape. He's got the Bendai, blah, blah, blah. They were like, this is an outrage. I don't know why I'm sounding like the Star Wars racist guys all of a sudden. Yeah. Do you think they were like, this is an outrage?
Yeah.
I don't know the Ligarians personally. I don't know. Maybe they...
I'm glad we didn't have to watch that, because I think that's exactly how they would have reacted.
Okay.
Based on the little bit of description we got from them.
Well, I hope nobody tells them that it was Picard the whole time.
Huh.
I was a little disappointed we didn't get to see flashes of Sarek's life in the mind meld, but I get budget-wise and time-wise. So that would have been a great way to work in some original series scenes, and then I'd be here complaining that we only saw scenes from Sarek that we'd seen before.
That's the clip show episode.
Right. Well, I just wanted flashes, but
yeah,
if they had showed scenes, it would have just been from the original series, and that would have annoyed me too. Right, so I guess I shouldn't complain.
So were they essentially saying that they switched bodies or switched places?
No.
Just a little bit, yeah.
No, I mean, when you mind meld, you get each other's memories and experiences, so they know they have that. They've shared that. And that's now Picard knows Spock intimately, really. But no, they're still their own person. They siphoned off the excess emotion to Picard, and Sarek took Picard's control and stability that because now that he has all of Picard's memories and personality, he can latch on to that stability and hold on to it to help him keep it in control.
But to describe what I was thinking about, though, I mean, he said something to the effect of, "I'm myself again, number one." Who was he talking to when he said number one?
Riker.
Okay, yeah.
He's got Picard's memories, so now he knows that whole relationship.
Interesting. And we flash over to Picard, and he's talking as though he is Sarek in another body and in a meat suit he can't control. Just these emotions,
I feel like
mind melds are
Picard
pretty dangerous.
Should have been in some kind of like a sickbay bed with restraints.
He should have been. I mean, because mind melds are dangerous and they can drive you insane if not carefully controlled. And given Sarek's mental state going into it, it was a bit risky. But
that gets into the Ben died. Like, so if Sarek, that part of his mind is in Picard, isn't the ship still at risk?
Picard doesn't have the telepathic ability to transfer it out.
Oh, okay, that's true.
Beverly sitting with Picard though was really sweet. I know she probably would have sat with anybody, but I was fearful for her, but yeah, I think you're right. No, and she reached out and touched his hand and she was going to be with him. I liked that a lot.
I thought they were going to put in all caps underneath that section, Emmy-winning performance or Cable Ace Award performance.
For your consideration.
Yeah. Although that said, I thought Patrick Stewart, he's committed, was great in that moment. I mean, that's not an easy thing. It's showy, but that doesn't mean it's easy. First
of all, let's start with the thing that Stephen said most recently, the showy thing. That got me a little bit. I was thinking it felt like a little self-indulgent, which is not to say that he was not being legitimately good and talented.
Right.
And it was great, but it just for the episode, it felt like a bit. Whose idea was it to put it in there? That kind of thing, almost like I'm doing Shakespeare, a few episodes back. It's a treat, but
yeah.
Is it forced in there just to do it?
I didn't feel that way.
Okay, I mean that's good.
I feel like if Mark Lenard hadn't been this episode, we'd be talking about just how good Patrick Stewart was in this episode. But instead, I was so focused on how good Mark Lenard was in this episode.
Spilling back into the character of Picard, this kind of ties back to what I was saying at the beginning. It was almost like him being that vehicle for like Star Trek fanboys watching, going, "Oh, I would," it was almost like Picard was insisting on being in the place of doing that as like a fan experience. And as Stephen was saying before, it seemed like there should have been other ways to handle this than that one person doing that. It was like, I guess it makes sense, but
I see your point, but I guess I just didn't see it that way.
So the other options you made me think of as we were talking about this, could he have been in sickbay and sedated?
I did wonder why they didn't sedate him. Yeah, absolutely.
Could there have been more than one person receiving Sarek's thoughts to balance the load or something? I don't know how that would work.
It's a good point, but I'd say the counter argument to that is mind melds are very personal, and that means he's sharing his entire self with multiple people, which I don't think he'd be excited about.
Right. There might have been other alternatives, but sometimes there are just alternative factors that just.
Oh God, Keith. God, Keith.
Sorry.
No, that was good. I mean, in any other arena, I would have given it to you, but tomorrow is yesterday, so I'm just gonna take a shore leave here and eat the apple.
Now I think it's getting out of hand.
I'm gonna go on an errand of mercy and change the subject. There's another card saying scheduled in this episode.
Yes.
Scheduled. I don't know if I've ever heard anyone else in my life ever say schedule, but
Bram Stoker's Dracula. I remember that just because Mel Brooks, Dead and Loving It. That's one of the things they bumped on immediately in the spoof version of the movie.
Are Americans the only ones that say schedule? Does the rest of the world say that uses that English say schedule?
I don't know.
Or the Romance languages? I don't know.
I assumed it was just like posh British, not even just regular British, just like.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
The goodbye scene in the transporter, I thought was very touching.
I did too. And as many misgivings as I had about this episode, I don't mean that I hated it by any means, but I thought that just still landed so well. And I got emotional. It got me.
Do we have any fashion notes this time?
I have one. Whatever was on Perrin's head, her headgear, it looked like the old thing the thing they would show if someone had a toothache. They would guide her around their
Yeah, I
head.
thought the same
That's
thing.
all I could think of. I was like, what is wrong with her? Does she have a toothache?
Oh, God, I have to look at a picture now.
That did occur to me. They did put out a Sarek action figure with him in the white robes from this episode.
Oh, really? That's
they
cool.
did. Yeah. I've got it in the basement.
I only have a couple more notes beyond that, or I don't. That's my only fashion note. I don't know if anyone else has a fashion note.
Not really. I am curious to see what the aliens look like that live in 300-degree slime pits. But
I think his parents says the line, "I know," when they're like, "You know, he loves you," of course. Or I think, which
I've always known.
Yeah, this is Star Trek stealing from Star Wars. Because as soon as they said it, I'm like, she's going to say, "I know." She said it.
It was pretty weird when she turned to Picard and called him a scruffy nerf herder.
And then he was frozen in carbonite.
Right. I really hope they unfreeze Picard next episode from the carbonite.
Several of the things we're talking about are allusions to our upcoming Toys episode. This is the first time I was obsessed with looking at the lights on the Enterprise. Every time it went by, I was just like, are they the same? Like, I feel like on the old Enterprise, I shouldn't say they never were. There were many times it was different things that were showing. But on this one, I was just, and there's no way I can tell. I'm not going to slow it down and Zapruder or film it, but can you hold hands on the transporter beam?
Yes.
I would be worried my molecules would.
So I mean, you can beam a larger object. I would just I would assume the transporter treats them as one object.
That seems dangerous.
It does.
We've seen them transport people, do it like while they're fighting and doing other kinds of weird things or running, and you know, I think it would work. But yeah, that's something that I feel like you wouldn't want people to do if they didn't absolutely have to do it.
I mean, what about in Star Trek 4 when Kirk's love interest threw herself on him?
Yeah, I was going to say, people have tried to have sex in a transporter beam.
Oh yeah, O'Brien.
Really?
They just slip O'Brien a few credits and he keeps it going.
I can't.
He's down with that.
Just keep beaming me, baby.
He's down with that.
Jeez, I'm trying to like even imagine real life. I feel like somebody would try to unsupervised, maybe.
Yeah.
Just it seems like such a dangerous thing to even consider doing. That why would you take that unnecessary risk if you didn't have to?
My one other note would be, we talked about it, how great Mark Lenard is, and I was just thinking about, and this happens to a lot of the Star Trek people or Star Wars people for that matter, maybe not as much for Star Wars, or different shows really, but you get typecast in that part. And Mark Lenard, I shouldn't say typecast, but he got to play this part over so many years. And it's like, he was really good at it. And he was a working actor. He had a pretty good career. And it's like, you know what? That'd be okay. I'd be okay with that.
Oh yeah.
And he was just really good. He was a good actor, obviously. And he's in my favorite movie, Annie Hall. He has a very brief, he doesn't have any lines, but.
I don't remember him from that. I have to watch that again.
He's like dressed like a Navy guy. It's the scene where Bobby Singer's on the Cavett show, and he's like, "Oh, I was designated 4P. In case of any hostilities, I was a hostage." So, yeah, and Mark Lenard's sitting right next to him. So,
well, this was directed by our old friend Les Landau. The television.
How is Les doing?
He's great.
Oh, buddy.
Story and teleplay by Peter S. Beagle, who doesn't have a lot of credits, but shortly after this, he created the Little Mermaid television series based on the Disney movie. But it was based on an unpublished story by Mark Cushman and Jake Jacobs. Now, Jake Jacobs doesn't have a lot of credits, and most of his credits are actually as an actor. He's got 17 acting credits and just 3 writing credits. He was in an episode of Nightmare on Elm Street. But let's talk about Mark Cushman for a minute, because Mark Cushman has a lot of writing credits. I'm going to read through more than a couple of his acting credits because I want to get your reaction. And keep in mind that all the credits I'm about to read came out after this.
Okay.
He wrote Sex Trek, Sex Trek 2, The Search for Sperm, Sex Trek 3, The Wrath of Bob, Sex Trek 5, Deep Space Sex, Sex Trek 6, The Next Orgasm, XXX Trek, The Final Orgasm, Sex Trek, The Maneater, Sex Trek Charlie XXX, Sex Trek where no one has come before with B4 and then an episode of Star Trek Continues, the fan-made television series just a few years ago. He also has a ton of other Secrets of Sex Island, The Sexperts, Cheating, Hot New Divorcees Gone Lesbo, My Mom's Best Friend, Real Big 50. Much better than It's 49.
All right. Apart from the obvious questions one would want to ask.
Yeah.
I'd like to know the timing.
866 writing credits, by the way.
Did you say
Wow.
866?
866 writing credits on IMDb.
Just 8.
Do it. Only 866. The timing. So he wrote this episode
First, before he wrote all of those parodies.
Oh my God.
Yes.
So then he just
And on a lot of those projects, he would get furious because the actors would improvise. Oh, he would get so mad.
I can imagine. It's like, do you know who I am? Do you know what I wrote, Sarek? It just
I consider myself quite a Star Trek fan. I don't think I've seen any of those Star Trek movies.
Nope, me either.
I mean, Sex Trek movies.
Yeah. I wonder if those are like something you find in the back of a video store back when we had those, or are they like Skinamax? Because I don't remember seeing them on Skinamax either.
I'll be honest, I have looked for Star Trek porn online and have been very disappointed by what little I found and the quality of it. So now maybe I'm just missing out. Maybe I need to go look up this guy.
That is curious, though. I mean, so it seems like there's like a legitimately interesting story involved from going from Next Generation to actually like full on porn versions. Like what was the conversation that happened there? Was he approached? Was this his goal all along? I mean, I don't know.
He wrote a lot more porn than just the Star Trek porn.
Right. So
yeah.
Was it like a foot in the door kind of thing?
I don't know. I mean, A Foot in the Door 3 was his movie. The first Foot in the Door was somebody else.
God.
The Foot in the Back Door.
Which is harder to get a hold of.
Scale of 1 to 10, how annoying was Wesley?
I wanted to give him like higher, but I liked him. That's what led me to the whole, I felt like everyone was picking on him. And then when he turns around, when Picard and Riker start to get into it, and he's like, oh, so it isn't just me. Yeah, I give him a 1. I liked Wesley.
I gave him a 2 simply because of the thing, that unresolved feeling of that went too far. But he did, it seemed natural this episode, like unusually natural the way it all flowed with him. So that was less annoying to me.
I'm going to dock him a point and give him a 2 as well for throwing Leah Brahms in Geordie's face when he hasn't done any better.
I'd give him a 0 if I could give him a 0 for that.
So you found that humanizing?
I was like, yeah, get him, Wesley. But yeah.
So who was your annoyance of the week?
I want to say Sarek, but I'm going to go with Bedrosian. I'm calling him Bedrosian just because I can't, whatever.
You thought Sarek was annoying? Oh, that makes me so sad.
I don't like how angry and illogical he is every time I see him. But
yeah, Mendrassan is who I'm going with as well.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah, for some reason I don't blame Sakov. I blame Mendrassan.
Yeah.
Much more measured approach. I mean, when it came down to it, he was willing to speak with Data when they could have a logical conversation. I appreciated that. So
and pump
Crush of Star
Data
Trek.
For information. I'm sticking with the Widow Apgar.
The headpiece there is tempting.
I know you like Vulcans and Sakov.
I ate too much candy.
No to we either, I suppose.
So my favorite ops girl was back on the bridge, the brunette whose name I don't know that never has any lines. So that tempted me because I had her for a while. But I'm going with Sarek. I had a big old man crush on him, and this episode I loved it once he got to chew the scenery.
And I didn't bother to look it up, but I was like, Mark Lenard's for lack of a better term, an advanced age at that point. He looks great. He looked great, man.
Yep.
He had to be in his 60s, I guess.
I don't know.
It was 200s.
Yeah.
I thought he looked great, acted great. I am definitely taking Mark Lenard as my man crush for the week. Ranking the episode, I think I'm going to have to let you guys pick where we're starting because I'm inclined to go high, and you both seem less enthused on this episode than I am. I thought we'd be talking about how much Steven loved seeing Sarek come back and stuff, and instead we're picking apart some of the logic.
Actually, that surprises me as well. But when Jimmy goes high, you go low. I certainly enjoyed the episode more when we talked through it. I mean, not that I hated it before either, but I mean, I think your high opinion of it is justified, I will say. However, there's so many other good things or good episodes this season. It's hard to say that it's going to be like.
Since we were talking yesterday's Enterprise, let's look at yesterday's Enterprise. Better or worse than that?
I would say worse because of the impact of what was going on in yesterday's Enterprise, and there's a lot more going on there.
Yeah, it's kind of just because I think of Yesterday's Enterprise as mirror, mirror. It's kind of TOS versus TOS for me too. Journey to Babel was also awesome. Yeah, I think I'd go below 2.
I would go above, and I'd go above The Defector. I would not go above Sins of the Father. So Yesterday's Enterprise is in 3rd place right now. I would have put this as second. Of the season under Sins of the Father, personally. But we're gonna go down. Right below Yesterday's Enterprise is Who Watches the Watchers, the Proto-Vulcans, Vulcan episode versus Vulcan episode.
Okay. I think we're getting in the ballpark, maybe at least. What's below that?
The Price.
I really like all these.
I'm not there. Maybe it's the nostalgia bias or whatever. It's just something.
Do you think it should be below those?
I do, but I mean, it's. This is if we're going purely on the events that transpired, as opposed to the affection for seeing Sarek.
Okay, so below The Price, we're down to The Offspring, Data's daughter.
Ooh,
I think I go above that.
Yeah.
Okay, then. Yeah. So this makes it number 6. Like I said, I would have put it number 2.
All right.
So, you guys, I was the outlier here, but that's okay. Next week, we are going to be watching Menage a Troy with Keith. Keith is already giving bonus points for the title.
It's already number 1 for me based on that.
When Deanna's mother spurns advances made by a Ferengi daemon, he takes it upon himself to kidnap the two of them along with Commander Riker and steal away aboard his ship.
Oh my God.
And
Ferengi are back.
Cushman had nothing to do with this one?
No.
He wrote a lot about these kind of things, these situations.
He's got to have that. I'm sure he was upset that title was taken.
He punched a hole through a wall.
Until then, live long.
And in honor of Spock.
Peace and long life.
Yeah, that scene got me. That was that guy. Now I'm getting emotional now again. That was great. Number 6.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?
We didn't rank who was the better wife, Amanda or Perrin.
Oh, don't even get me started. Amanda never had a toothache. Yeah,
I think it's an easy answer, Amanda. It's Amanda.
We're talking Jane Wyatt Amanda, not Winona Ryder. Although Winona Ryder's Amanda was great. I have other issues with that. We'll get into that in 10 to 12 years.
Or the Star Trek Discovery version of Amanda, Mia Kirshner.
Oh yeah, I love Mia.
She's great. She's really good.
Yeah. Wow.
But I'd say Jane Wyatt beats this Perrin.
Yeah. Patty. Patreon.com/IB. Go there, support us. And support us here. What episode is it?
Sarek.
Oh my God. Now enjoy us episode with the unforgettable Sarek on his Salvage Before. What the hell?